we've got this down. So good morning, everybody. I am so excited to get to be able to speak to you all this morning and introduce you to Amy Marquis, my very fabulous client. We've been working together now for about a year, I guess. So I just, I know so much about her work and what she's up to, but I want you all to learn about that. And also, I had framed this month as Couples in Production. And between the time that we started that and now, Amy is not part of a couple. So we decided we were going to go ahead anyway. And we're going to talk about, still about partnerships and working in production. One of the things that happened, and we'll get to this, is that Amy has been working on a project on a film with her daughter, which is really amazing. So we're going to talk about that. So Amy, I just want to have you introduce yourself a little bit and tell people where you are, because most of my clients are in the Bay Area or they're in Miami, and you are in neither of those places. So let's just start with telling us where you are.
Sure. And apologies if my connection isn't great. I'm actually not in my own home right now.
It's perfect.
Okay,
perfect.
good. So I am a director editor, and I'm based right on the edge of Boulder, Colorado, which is actually a really great place to be if you're not in California or you're not in New York. The network here is surprisingly awesome. It's small, but there are a lot of really fantastic filmmakers, industry luminaries, lots of creative people doing really, really good work.
Do you know why that is, Amy? Do you know what is the Boulder film thing? What is all going on there?
I know there's one guy who goes way back decades. He was, I think, one of the first Oscar winners for a documentary. And he's based here. I think more recently, it's just, the Front Range is a place where a lot of people are flocking. And it has a lot of appeal if you're coming from the coasts, where it's a little bit cheaper, a little bit smaller. It's not feeling that way anymore, but to me, from my perspective here. But, there are a lot of things drawing people here. Denver is just, blooming into this amazing art scene. Boulder, you've got the quality of life, like you can leave the editing cave and go hike and get your head straight, which is important for me.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you spend hours staring at that screen, so it's really important to be able to take those breaks and to be able to really get outside. It's just amazing. So I want to start with the my question that I always like to ask, which is, how did you start? When did you realize that you were a filmmaker? How did it all happen?
I think I can look back to around 8 years old and see that I was doing things that was putting me on the path, but I didn't know at the time that that was filmmaking. I had a flatbed tape recorder, and it was my favorite toy. Yeah, I mean, just, like a little, yeah. So, it was my generation. I'm 42. So I had a flatbed tape recorder, and I loved watching the Discovery Channel shows, the nature shows. So I would write scripts, and I would record them and do the sound effects with like the lions and it was hilarious. God. I wish I still had those tapes. So what I didn't realize was I was kind of creating my own films just through audio, through my little cassette tapes. And music, growing up, I loved movie soundtracks. Those are a big part of my life and upbringing. And I actually started professionally in the magazine world because I wanted to write and edit. And I ended up editing photographs, and a lot of times when I would sit and create write the story or edit the photos, I'd have to listen to music that felt like it matched the story for me. So the more that developed and the more we started to push our printed stories into video and digital, that's when I started realizing, oh, right, there's this thing called filmmaking, and I actually really want to do it.
And how old were you then? How old were you and where were you?
With the magazine work?
Yeah.
That was my early 20s. I started at 22, right out of college in DC.
Ah, okay. What did you study in college?
Journalism.
Oh, it's so funny. It's just ridiculous how much you and I talk and how many conversations we have had. And then, you ask a couple of different questions and find out all this new stuff. I didn't know you studied journalism. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. I didn't know that.
I started out in biology. I wanted to swim with the dolphins someday, and my brain just didn't work that way, and I had a hard time keeping up with that. So I switched halfway through, and it was perfect. It was a good switch.
Wow. So when did you make the shift to film, and how did you go about it? Because I feel as though often a lot of the people who are on the call, some are already full-time filmmakers, but many want to become full-time filmmakers. So how did you make that shift?
I worked under a fantastic editor who was all about innovation and trying things and failing if you had to. So this is when I was at National Parks Magazine, which is the publication through the National Parks Conservation Association. And I started to see, I think Media Storm was the group that was the production company that was really, so Brian and I go way back.
Wow.
So that was the production company that I started paying attention to.
Just for everybody on the call, Brian Storm was my guest a month and a half ago or something. So yeah, Media Storm. If you're interested in documentary filmmaking, Media Storm is a great company to check out. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think I was actually in Big Bend National Park in West Texas on an assignment with an amazing photographer writing a feature story. And he pulled up this little video by Media Storm, and I was like, oh my God, you can do this? Like, this is where it's going. So I got really excited, and I started advocating to do more video around our magazine content. And Scott, my boss at the time, was totally on board, but we didn't know what we were doing. So we just started watching advocacy videos, and we saw a lot of really bad stuff and then a few gems. And we started deciding, from that, we started learning how to do it, what we wanted to do. And as I was going through that process of learning, I would talk to colleagues and they were interested in it. So I started this little blog called The Digital Naturalist. That to this day, that title is just weird. But and I ended up just interviewing all these filmmakers and spotlighting really great short form video content that, crossed over into short film and documentary. And then before I knew it, I was at the Mountain Film Festival, and then I had a sabbatical and made 2 short films in Yosemite. And once I did that, once I was on set, there was just no turning back. It was just figuring out how to transition from print to film full time.
And I know this about you, not everybody knows this about you, but you really have a specialization in I think of it as the outdoor space, the outdoor nature space, I guess it is. Was that always, like back when you were studying journalism and you got your first job, was it a coincidence that your first job was in that arena, or was that what you were looking for?
No, it's what I was looking for. I mean, that was an important part of my upbringing. I was an outdoor girl, especially moving to Boulder. That was a big part of my life. I think though it was, so my first real assignment, I got a grant in my journalism school as a graduating senior, and I had to go write about the endangered sea turtles in Malaysia. And that was cool because it kind of took my love of what I thought was biology and then paired it with my journalism. And I got to go out and be a journalist in Malaysia and talk about the endangered green sea turtles. And I think it was on that trip where I realized that you can't remove the human story from the conservation story. And a lot of times it's a lot more nuanced and complicated than people want to give it credit for. It's not black and white. And the people who are, part of these landscapes, a lot of consideration too. So pretty early on, I learned you can't separate the two. And I think I found myself feeling frustrated in the nonprofit world, in the conservation area, how a lot of these groups approached their conservation ethos. Yeah, so, I when I started making films, I was making them in the national parks because that was where all my contacts were. That's where all the stories were that I knew of. And even though they were cultural stories, I kind of got lumped in with the adventure film crowd. So, which is fun, I'm a climber and everything. So that was fun, but I've been eager to push more into like the true documentary space. And a lot of times though, nature still shows up as this backdrop for my subjects.
Well, another thing, was that trip to Malaysia, I know that you are part Indonesian. Was that also part of it? Because Malaysia and Indonesia are pretty darn close to each other.
Yeah, for sure. So I was adopted. I was born in Indonesia. And my dad did a lot of work there. So throughout my life, we would go back to Southeast Asia. So it was a comfort zone for me.
Yes.
And actually I was visiting places where my parents had lived, 30 years prior. And running into people who knew them. So it's even though it was all the way on the other side of the world, it was like a second home.
Wow. Yeah, wonderful. Oh, so you'd already been visiting Indonesia. This wasn't all new to you. Very interesting. Right. So it's just because I know kind of where we're going to end up with the story. It's just also interesting to me, like how these pieces all come together, because I think that when you talk about the adventure space or the outdoor space, I forget what the phrase was you just used, but I think that there's a very, just that term suggests to me anyway, maybe as an outsider, because I'm a city girl, but it suggests to me, a space that's very white, very male, and so how does that all work together? How do you fit into that or not?
Yeah, great question. I've become a lot more aware of that in some ways in the last 6 months. I think I was adopted by two white middle-class American parents and just blended in enough to be a part of that world pretty unconsciously. Looking back, I think there were a lot of moments where I didn't feel like I fit in, and I did feel like I looked different, whether other people realized it or not. And unconsciously, I was also drawn towards different stories and different groups of people who aren't often represented, equally in media. And I think I remember. Well, this is more to the female thing, but I remember at one mountain film festival, they had a coffee talk one morning about women in film. And it really triggered me. I was like, I don't want to be a woman filmmaker. I just want to be a good filmmaker. Like, why do we have to do this? But I showed up and I listened, and I had a lot of epiphanies in that session, things I just hadn't been aware of, that were absolutely true and absolutely important. And that was kind of the beginning of a process of really coming to terms with my own identity and seeing the places where, you know, you're just up against these old, tired norms in either the film industry or outdoor industry or whatever. And I've hit a lot of walls. You know, I don't always know why. I don't think I can blame, well, anyway. Yeah, it's been an interesting evolution.
Can you remember anything specific from that panel that you were like, I don't want to go to that, you know, and then you were like, ah. Can you remember anything?
You know, I want to say I think that's where I started to learn and this is generalizing, this is where I have a little bit of trouble with these things, but the trends that women don't advocate for themselves in the same way that men do and can, and you know that there's this tendency for us to say, oh, we're not ready yet. We're like the kind of masculine energy to swoop in and say, I can do this even if I don't know how yet. So, I mean, Joanne, this is where you've helped me a ton, is just balancing those energies and really, you know, finding confidence and not letting the doubts stop the progress.
Yeah, like my thing is like, whatever the question is, can you do, yes. Can you do this? Yes. Figure it out later. But yeah, to have that kind of enthusiastic energy for something. And another way that I put it is, you know, keeping all the doors open, you know, whereas, you know, we tend to sort of say, well, no, I don't really know, or that kind of thing, which is kind of closing a door instead of opening a door. But that's great. I just love the story of kind of being like annoyed by something and then being inspired. That's great. Yeah. So since then, would you say then that, because I want to go back to something you were saying earlier about being interested in, you use the term true documentary, but all these years that you've been still working in this, I'm going to call it outdoor space just for shorthand, has that been an inspiration for you? Is that still something that you really love about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm, yes. I still believe that in so many ways, there's no better healing space than nature. I mean, we're human, and if we're not connected to that, there's something that's off. And I've dealt with stories of trauma and inequality, and a lot of times that's a place where the real stuff unfolds. You know, these beats and films in my film projects. There's a lot of healing there for the people I work, the subjects I work with. So yes, that inspires me. I mean, again, just walking away from the edit and hitting a trail out here, that's huge for my career. So I'd say, you know, I think as a genre, things started to get a little formulaic to me, and there are great outdoor industry brands who have been making big plays in the film space lately with their own branded content, but also coming in as sponsors for independent films, and I have benefited from those relationships, and I'm really grateful for them. But you know, I have to say, there was a year at Mountain Film recently where I just, it didn't feel real to me. There were lines being crossed, and I felt like an audience, as a viewer, I felt a little manipulated at times, and that didn't sit super well with me. So I think when I say true documentary, I think
I see what you mean.
I still love that. I still love that space where the independent art is honored and supported, which I know, you know, can be hard things to bring together sometimes, but yeah.
So before we move off that then, because I think that you do have more experience than many filmmakers with working with brands and working with sponsors, partners, you know, whatever word we want to use for that. how did that come about, and how you just said you've benefited from it? So what does that look like? What does benefiting from those relationships, partnerships look like?
So my first brand relationship came when I launched my first Kickstarter campaign 7 years ago. And as I was transitioning off National Parks Magazine, I was developing a series called National Park Experience that I wanted to use to make short films that created a drumbeat up to the centennial in 2016, and really honored the diversity that doesn't much media attention in the national parks. So we found subjects who you don't typically associate with those outdoor spaces. The first film we made was a Mexican-American couple who got married in the Tetons and had like their entire like LA, Texas family come out and celebrate and like make chicken tinga and like all, you know, all these things that are just so in my mind to the very white national park experience. And national parks used to be segregated too. That's something that a lot of people don't realize or don't remember. So anyway, long way of saying, as I was launching this series, we created a Kickstarter campaign. And around the same time, there was an outdoor industry show that my business partner, my filmmaking partner, Dana Romanoff, and I went to at the time, and we ended up drinking wine in like the North Face booth with the head of diversity and inclusion at REI. So we had this great conversation and launched the Kickstarter campaign and kind of stayed in touch. And about halfway through, we got a message from her saying, we want to donate $10,000 to the campaign. So totally unsolicited, like just magic. We put the thing out there and someone responded, and it was huge. And REI, they were amazing partners. They came in and they sponsored our premiere party where we showed Love in the Tetons, and they were really great partners throughout the whole thing. But through them, you know, Osprey came on board. We partnered with Pendleton. That also kind of led us to Dayton Duncan, who's Ken Burns' producer, who connected us with WETA, and we got a grant through them to make our next film. So it was very organic. Yeah.
Very nice. And the other thing that I think that you've done a fantastic job of is maintaining those relationships over these 7 years. How do you do that? How do you steward? In traditional fundraising terms, it's called stewardship. So how do you steward those relationships over time?
You know, I think, and this is where being in the little outdoor industry bubble is helpful. You know, I've gone to a lot of outdoor retailer shows. A lot of these folks show up at the Mountain Film Festival, which again was my first festival. So it's kind of like a home base for me in the festival world. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, just in those in-person events, making sure you're getting face time with the people who are making decisions about their, you know, film budgets, and watching what they're doing and staying in touch with other filmmakers who are producing in that space. Emails about, hey, I've got this new project going, any interest, or just, hey, I have this new project going, wanted you to see.
Great. No, you do a really, really good job at that. And I think that that's why when, you know, this whole thing about terminology, about, you know, corporate sponsors is one word. What else did we just say? Corporate sponsors. But I like the term partners, because you really are working in partnership with them to sort of find out what is it that they're interested in and what is it that they are looking for. So for example, with REI, what do you think today they're looking for that may have changed since 7 years ago? As just an example, because I think most people know the brand REI.
Sure. I know they kind of have different tiers of film financing that they do now. They're the kind of partnership brand videos. They're the short documentary spaces, and then they're leaping into big feature productions too. They were,
Wow.
they were sponsors on Wild with Reese Witherspoon. So I know they're always kind of keeping, and I actually have a dear friend who's producing a feature doc about the first women in Afghanistan to summit the highest peak in Afghanistan. And I know they were in conversations at one point too. So I hope I'm not saying too much, but
right.
I think
nobody heard that. It's okay. Nobody heard that.
Right. I think right now it's a little, as far as REI goes now, I actually don't feel like I have a good read of them or really any brands, because so many have had to just trim way back because of the pandemic. So it's interesting to kind of try to rebuild those conversations now.
Well, it's interesting. What I have been hearing a lot is that brands are not so much cutting back because of the pandemic, but certainly having to rethink their messaging, more to do with issues of racism and diversity, and to really think about how they are presenting themselves in the mainstream, given that I think the best shorthand term that I can think of is there's a reckoning, that it's not okay anymore to just keep going with the same old, and that things need to change. So I think that there's a time of rethinking and repositioning that I think is happening in a big way. So in these intervening years, so you started with all these short films, you started to develop these relationships with corporate partners, and then it feels as though then you started working on longer form projects. And how did that happen?
Yeah, so the film that we actually closed the series out with was a feature. And that was, we had an executive producer who came on board. He was one of the subjects, and he had this vision for a road trip he wanted to take with his band through the Colorado River Basin. And it aligned really beautifully with, a lot of the messages we were pushing through with our series. So we actually ended on a feature note, which was fun.
Nice.
That showed on PBS, and I think is on their website still.
What's it called?
I also Confluence,
right?
Yeah, it's a sweet little film. And then I also, when we were putting out Love in the Tetons, I met a local emerging filmmaker who created a program to take formerly incarcerated young men on adventures across the country. And the program is called Rewilding. So from the very beginning, I was aware of this project. They took the road trip in 2016, 7 weeks across the West, with a young man from the Bronx, and had a bunch of film footage, went through a couple editors, brought me on as a story consultant, and then they gave me the edit. So I've been working on that since January 2nd, actually January 1st. I think I didn't do anything on New Year's Eve this year because I was like, I have to edit a feature tomorrow. So that's been a really, really fun and rewarding project. And I can't say any names, but we just were able to speak with this amazing luminary who test screened the piece, and we're kind of pivoting with the story now, which is also very exciting. And I was also working on another feature doc, which I've rolled off of for the last 4 years. It was like film school, so
yes,
I'm grateful for it.
And so what's this sort of interesting pivot that you've taken? And I guess I would really imagine if I asked everybody on this call if they have pivoted since COVID, they probably will say yes, so you were working on a feature plus this feature that you were hired as the editor and story consultant, and a kind of long short when you and I started working together, and then COVID hit And all of a sudden, I remember we had this conversation one day and you were like, well, I think that I may have this idea.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes. So what happened?
The idea actually came up a year ago, but so I have a daughter. She's 8. She's wonderful. We're best buddies, and I just have moved out of this neighborhood, but we live in like just really white suburbia, white picket fences, beautiful planned community. There's a golf course in the middle of it. It's kind of not ever been our style, but we were there, and there are a lot of great things about it. But I remember a year ago, I went on a bike ride around the neighborhood on the most beautiful summer night, and I was the only person who wasn't in a car, and there were no kids playing outside. And I remember thinking, really questioning if this is the childhood that I wanted for my kid. It looked really different from mine. My mom was always calling me in for dinner. I had, friends. I was always grass stained. And that hadn't been her experience in this neighborhood. So I started kind of playing around with the idea of a film about sort of the rewilding of my own daughter. Pitched it somewhere, it didn't take, and then it just sat. And then the pandemic happened, and all of a sudden she had this unstructured time. I had time because I lost quite a bit of work. And Joanne, we had that conversation, and you said, like, I don't care what your business plan is, you just need to film Era right now. Something to that effect.
I'm not very nice to my clients, just.
Well, I mean, I think what was great about it was it took off the pressure of like the business side of it, and you just gave me permission to just pick up my camera and film my daughter every day. And that was a huge gift. So, we started breaking out of the golf course because that shut down. And Colorado, this really cool thing happened in Colorado where we would howl every night at 8:00 to honor the healthcare workers. So all of a sudden this place with like all these white picket fences and like, totally over manicured suburbia, like is howling at every night at 8:00. And Era was part of that. So I started off thinking, okay, this is a story about my daughter's reconnection to her inner wildness and nature, which can be hard to find in that neighborhood. And then Ahmaud Arbery was killed, Breonna Taylor was murdered, George Floyd was murdered. And it became a much bigger story for me. I think what I started to see was that there was the things that bothered me about our community. There was a whole other, there was a depth to that I hadn't seen until all of it happened. And my daughter looks white, she's a little blondie. You'd never know that she was a quarter Indonesian. And so we became active in some local protests, and we put up a big Black Lives Matter sign on our white picket fence, and we're basically the only house in the entire suburb to do so. And then when I'm realizing I'm editing now, I've got my story map behind me. But there's kind of a tension where, Era's just trying to have her magical summer, and I'm kind of over here trying to figure things out. And then we come back together in this really cool scene at the end.
And so going from the features and the longer work that you were doing, you always planned that this was going to be a short film, right? How long is it? Do you know roughly how long it is?
Aiming for 7 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And where are you at with the film now, and what's happening with it?
So I ran a Kickstarter campaign to get funding for this. That was a lot of fun and a lot of work and very successful. Through Kickstarter, a civil rights attorney from New York found the project. He's been wanting to get more involved in film, so he came on as an executive producer outside of the campaign. and basically doubled my budget, which is awesome. I mean, it's still really, you know, it's a great, modest, you know, short film budget, but I can do everything I want to do, which is great. So when the Kickstarter campaign wrapped, we did several more shoots to get everything we needed. And I'm editing now. I had a storyboarding session with my story consultant and writer a couple weeks ago. So I've got the map that I'm following, and we have one more thing we need to do with voice actors for a couple scripted scenes. But we're close. I think by October we're going to have, you know, sometime in October, not early October, but mid to late, we're going to be really close to the finish line.
Yeah, yeah. I put the Kickstarter campaign link in, and I would really highly recommend that you check it out. The campaign is over, although, hey, you can still give, but it was a very well run campaign. How much was it that you started out? What was your goal?
My goal is $15,500.
And you ended up raising?
Well, I think I exceeded that by a couple thousand. What it looks like is that we exceeded it by over 10. But that last donation was fraudulent, unfortunately.
Oh, does that still show on the campaign?
Yeah, it shows.
Oh.
So if you go to the campaign page, it's really impressive, but that's not actually what we brought in.
Oh, that's really, that is a Kickstarter problem. They need to solve that. But anyway, it was a beautifully run campaign. And so any of you who want to do crowdfunding, you know, check out Amy's project and see how she did it. We always work very closely together on those campaigns, because actually I was just listening to Peter Broderick, who's been in distribution for documentaries for a long time. And he was saying, I love it when people say exactly what I think, because I feel like that's what I'm always saying, but now somebody else is saying it. But he said, you know, crowdfunding campaigns are really, really important for the visibility. And the money is great too, you know, but the visibility, the getting the word out, getting people to start to know about the project and what you're working on. And I think this is a film that people are genuinely excited about seeing, you know. And I like also how it's kind of this, it's sort of this short piece that's a break between these longer pieces, you know. And I wonder if you could also explain what it means when you are brought in as a story consultant, and then what you look for when you're hiring a story consultant. What is that partnership about?
I feel like the beauty of story consultants is to help you take a step back and see things clearly. So I'll start with where I hire mine. It's usually because I'm a very intimate part of the film somehow. Either the subject is someone who's close to me, or like my daughter, and I'm in it. So I can't necessarily see it objectively, and I'm not quite sure how others react to certain things. So that's where Vicki Curtis has been an incredible player in Era Untamed, this film. And she's incredibly talented and skilled too. So that's been great. You know, as far as where I step in on other people's projects, I think, I don't know if this is the right way to approach this, but I usually notice that they're blocked somehow in their view. And I just kind of come in and help them so they can actually see what's there a little more clearly. And in all cases that I've story consulted, the filmmaker has also been a subject. So it's
oh, that's interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
Huh. That's very interesting. So when the filmmaker is blocked, is it that they're not seeing the full picture of what they have, or is it that there's something?
Show you how to set a custom white balance on your Nikon Zen 6.
What is that? Somebody's unmuted, I think. Do you mean that they're not seeing the full story? Just say a little bit more about that.
Sure. I think, you know, sometimes it has to do with their evolution in their own story. They're just not quite to the end of it yet. And it's helpful to have someone in the room who's like, well, you know, asking the questions. And a lot of times I'll step into a sort of director role to take that off their plate for a second and ask the questions to draw out the stuff that needs to come out. Yeah, I mean, honestly, sometimes it's they're blocked in their life, in just how they see themselves in the world. Other times, I think they just can't quite see the arc of the story, and again, it's just that objectivity,
right?
That's hard to bring into your own story.
Well, I mean, it's great because for fiction filmmakers, that story, I don't think we use the term story consultant, but we maybe use the term script consultant or something like that. So, you know, trying to get the shape of a story right, or the arc of the story right. And it's so useful to have an outside eye, or 10, depending on how many you can handle, just to look at that. And then one last thing that I'd like to ask you about before I open it up to questions is that you and I are both very, very active members of an organization called Brown Girls Doc Mafia. I'm going to write it here in the chat. Brown Girls Doc Mafia. So none of you knew this, but Amy and I are mafiosas. We're mafiosas. And I wonder if you could say a little bit about why we just love this organization so much.
Oh my gosh. What an amazing group of women. You know, I think, again, I also just got invited to Film Fatales. I don't know if that's how they pronounce it. That's how I pronounce that word. Which is, I think you have had to have made a feature film and be a director to be a part of that group. They're amazing. I'm also a member of a local group who serves female filmmakers in Colorado in the Four Corners region called Luca Media Collective. They are the fiscal sponsors of all of my film projects that need fiscal sponsorship. I think what just blows me away about the mafiosas is how active they are, the range of experience. I mean, you have Ava DuVernay, am I saying that right? Am I saying her last name right? She's the director of The 13th. She's like, you know, making Netflix films. And I mean, Yabu Boyd is just incredible. She's right. Like you have these like high level, like veteran industry luminaries, you know, down to like the emerging women who have just so much potential and big ideas. And I think what I love there too is we're having conversations that you're not hearing anywhere else in the industry. You know, ethics, behavior, morals, like how someone knows when a production company responds in a certain way. Like it's just really safe space to discuss a lot of the landscape that can feel hard for women of color in the film industry.
You know, I used to run IFP Miami, which is defunct now. It died after I left, but it was part of a group. And what I would say is that being a member of Brown Girls Doc Mafia is for me what true support really is. And not everybody on this call is a brown girl by any means. Amy's a brown girl, I'm a brown girl, although it's so weird to have the color thing because I don't look brown. But anyway, to have a network that is truly supportive. And when I actually started to physically be with brown girls, which was at Sundance and Slam Dance this year for the first time, it brought up so many memories for me of being in collectives where I had not been supported. And so I really would like to wish that for all the filmmakers here, that you can find that true support rather than something that's kind of phony and, possibly harmful, but yeah, we have I have a number of other clients in the group, but it's a fantastic organization. And as I said, I hope that you all can find which organizations those are that can provide that for you. So we're going to open it up for questions. And this is the moment where everybody gets a little shy and quiet. Hey, Mark.
I'm so shy and so quiet. I'm struggling to overcome it. Amy, thank you so much. I learned so much about you that I didn't know before. And it really, I already liked what I saw. What's happening? I don't want to pry into your personal life, but what's happening with the hydrochloroquine expose?
Good question, Mark. And I've been wanting to connect with you on this. Should I just share this, Joanne? Okay.
Your choice.
Yeah. No. I'm happy to do it. Right. It's part of the filmmaking life.
Filmmaking life.
Filmmaking life.
Filmmaking life.
Right. So I was in a relationship with a man for the last 4 years, and we really came together through film in a lot of ways. He was working in the outdoor industry at the time, and he has an interesting story. He took an anti-malarial drug when he was 24 in 1992, and it permanently damaged his brain. And the class of drugs that is still on the market and being prescribed, and made a huge resurgence with COVID because hydroxychloroquine is part of that family. And that's the drug that Trump has been pushing pretty hard on a lot of people with very little knowledge about what this class of drugs does. So Jordan has his own personal story that's a part of this. That was very important to him, that be the central through line. And then there's also the much bigger global story that came along with it. Jordan and I split. I think COVID has been a very interesting time for a lot of couples in the world, and we're among them. And I can't make the film. So I'm viewing it as an incredible experience in working with someone I respect and admire. And it was like putting myself through film school. And it Brian, we would not have met if I hadn't been pitching that in Sebastopol.
Wow.
That's right. That's where we met.
Yep.
Sebastopol. Yes. Well, what was that? That was a wonderful event. What was that?
It was the Peer Pitch West.
Peer Pitch West. It's PEER, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. That's funny because
and it's through Docs in Progress. Yeah.
So
yes,
I just want to say that I thought it was a really great film. It was, what you did on it was beautiful. It was meaningful. I thought it would be really timely. I didn't know that there were other personal issues going on. I've had it happen where I've had a couple of projects that I've had to walk away from. None that I have gone quite as far as you've gone, because you were pretty far along with a great film project, and I've been talking about this hydroxychloroquine thing that my friend is working on, and it's really timely. It's got to come out soon. So thanks for letting me know. I'm sorry you I'm sorry about what happened, but hopefully new things are coming into being for you.
Mark, it's really interesting that you bring this up. I want to mention another resource that I like. I don't talk about this much these days, but the truth is, I think it's foundational. But The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron is an amazing book for artists. And I believe it's chapter 9. Not that I know the book very well, but I think it's in chapter 9. It talks about how, as artists, when we have projects that get stalled or get sidetracked or, die in some way, that we actually have to do some work to be able to move past them, and it will surely eventually lead to more creativity, but it's just a process in the artist's journey, in the filmmaker's life. It's a very, very common process. I certainly have had it myself.
Well, let me just say that there's some. Okay.
I had a feature film that was stolen from me by a collaborator who told me that it was because the work wasn't good enough or something like that. And then a few years later, I was at a job interview at the biggest art museum in Miami. And the woman interviewing me kept saying, but I'm sure that I know you. I'm sure that I know you. And it turns out that he had shown footage at the museum of this film that he said was no good and had destroyed. So we've all, I think, had those kind of experiences, and it's really important to do this emotional, spiritual, psychological work to move through them, Thanks for sharing that, Amy. Who else has a question? Another shy, retiring person needs to speak up. Diane, yes.
Yeah, that's the watchword when you're talking about me as shy and retiring.
That's right.
Joanne, thank you so much. Because I couldn't find the link last night to, make sure that I called this morning. And the first thing I saw in my box this morning was that Amy was speaking. So it's like, oh my God. So yeah, I don't know, it's like, I'm a total fan. I don't want to put it like that, kind of like,
I like it. Yeah.
But, and I'm so sorry. I did not know about you and Jordan. And I know that, this is not the place to discuss that, but I don't know. And I'm not really sure exactly what I want to ask about that, but what I find very intriguing is sort of the fact that you are a filmmaker that is coming from, to me, it's like conservation, not just the outdoor, but very much conservation. And what I find really intriguing right now is the melding of obviously social justice and conservation, though it's always been there, but it feels like it's sort of coming to a head in a new way. And maybe if you could speak a little bit to that, because that's something that I find particularly intriguing when I think of you as a filmmaker, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, cool question. Yeah, I am aware of some projects that are coming up. I think I've seen some stuff on the Brown Girls Doc Mafia site, actually, that are really addressing how environmental issues disproportionately affect marginalized communities. Those are not necessarily the stories I'm working on or are calling to me at the moment. I think it's important. I still kind of get a feeling that a lot of that is for kind of the traditional audience, white audience, or anyway, I don't want to make that prediction or judgment either. I think all of these questions about conservation, the way we build communities on our land, the way we treat each other has to do with a deeper psychology and our behavioral defaults that I'm very, very curious about. And every time I step into a film, every time I choose a subject, I think it's my psychology nerd who's just kind of like, what happened? Mm-hmm. How did it shape you? why are you doing what you're doing, and what's the thing you need to break out of to get to the other side? And I think that covers all those topics for me. I'm just so curious about the human experience and what it takes to overcome the hard stuff. It's inspiring me. It helps me figure out my own life.
All right. Yeah, thanks. Because I know living in Santa Barbara, and when you're talking about the use of space and the fact that obviously this is a community that's incredibly white. I mean, it's just, even though it's over 50, you know, the population has been over 50% Latino. And so for me, because, yeah, I mean, for me, I love your quote when you said like walking away from the edit and going out on the trail, because for me, that's a huge piece of what heals me, is being out in nature. And what I find particularly intriguing in this area is just the difference in use, and that when I'm out, I'm starting to see more brown and Black folks on the trail. And there's a difference in the way it's used, and and the difference. Yeah, it's intriguing to me, and because it is just so blatant in terms of what goes on in Santa Barbara, as reflected. Yeah,
that's great, Diane. And I feel as though I know my whole kind of the core reason that I work with filmmakers is so that we can all tell our authentic stories, white, brown, whatever, that we can tell our authentic stories, because our authentic stories are what people need to hear, because the sort of homogenized version of reality is just not what is not what's interesting. I'm having an experience myself recently. One of my clients we're looking at all these particular type of films. I'm not going to go into it, and I keep watching them, and they should be really exciting. They're all women directors and so on, and I'm looking at them like I'm bored to tears.
Oh my God.
I'm just tired of seeing the same old story over and over again. And I don't mean to do with genre. I mean to do with,
right.
Come on, there's something deeper. There's something more real. There's some more authentic place that we can go as storytellers, So I like to end on time, and I just wanted to thank you very much, Amy. I'm just very, very, very fascinated to talk to working filmmakers, and you are just doing such a fantastic job, even if you've taken a little break for being focused on the business. We'll get back there, but it's all going great anyway. So,
yeah, thank you.
And I put my calendar here in the chat. If anybody is interested in talking to me about working one-on-one, I see all kinds of people here that I haven't met before, and I'd love to talk to you.
Highly recommend it. Changed my life.
Thank you, Amy. We really do, and we have a lot of fun, even if I'm kind of mean sometimes. No, I'm not. And when everybody hangs up, Diane, I need to talk to you if I can keep you for a minute, or we can get on the phone afterwards. And next week, because this was supposed to be Couples in Production Month, Thomas Allen Harris, who was my guest a few weeks ago, is going to be on with his partner, Don Perry. And they are a married couple and a producing couple. And interestingly, it's like a segue, but they are, I don't know if they're going to talk about it, but I think they probably will. They're starting pitching an outdoor series that they want to do. They are like major hikers. So every day they go out, they live around the corner from the Appalachian Trail. And so they're always out in nature. They're big outdoor people. And so that's just one of their projects. But anyway, so they're going to come on next Thursday and talk to us. And then the next month, I've got a set of guests in the BIPOC queue, we called it, space. And then the next month it's going to be international filmmakers. And again, you know, I'm always just interested in, you know, how do you work? How do you pay the bills? How are you making a living? How do you manage all those relationships with the money and all of that? So anyway, it was lovely to have you all on the call today, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody. Bye, Kim. Where are you?
Bye.
Where are you located, Kim? I haven't met you before. Where are you located? You're muted.
There we go. So I have been on here a couple of times, but I'm usually like in the corner, kind of quiet, one of those shy ones.
Being quiet.
So I'm close to you. Aren't you in San Francisco?
I'm now in Missoula, Montana.
Oh, Missoula, Montana. Okay, so I am currently in Utah right now at a friend's house, but I live in San Jose, California.
Where in Utah?
Park City.
Oh, very nice. I've been there many times for the festival. Well, that's a pleasure to be there.
Thank you.
And who else do I not know who's on? Daniel, are you here? Can you hear me? Daniel? Where are you based? I'm not sure that he could. There's something funny about your video thing, Daniel. So, and Sharonda, I've never met you before. And Angelique is also my fabulous intern, Angela Salazar and Angelique Doty came to me through the University of Pacific through my client, Kevin. So thank you so much, as always, for your help, Angela. And somebody with an anonymous, Daniel's an assistant editor in San Francisco. Lovely to meet you, Daniel. All right, so bye everybody. I guess we'll get on the phone, Diane, then. Okay. All right, bye everybody.
Bye.
Thank you again so much, Amy. Thank you for taking
Amy, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a lovely Thursday.